I'm Dr. Mark Sherwood, naturopathic doctor and co-founder of the Functional Medical Institute in Tulsa. I'm also a 24-year veteran of the Tulsa Police Department, including 10 years in the SWAT team. I ask for just a few minutes of your time to talk with you about how we're going to prevent the most imminent threat facing Oklahomans today. This is both a health issue and a law enforcement matter, but more than that, our very sovereignty is at stake. Joe Biden is begging the World Health Organization, which is under the control of the Chinese Communist Party, to take over control of these United States. He is abdicating his responsibility as president, and it remains to be seen if the United States Congress will abdicate theirs. But I assure you that under the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, I will not abdicate my responsibilities as next Oklahoma governor. First, let's look at this treasonous attempt to betray our country and relinquish our sovereignty. And then I'll tell you how Oklahoma, under the 10th Amendment, will refuse to submit to federal and foreign tyranny. Kevin Stitt is too busy picking fights with our friends and neighbors from the tribes and defending himself from scandals to be paying attention to this imminent threat. Folks, that's going to change when I'm elected. We will defend Oklahoma and Oklahomans with our very lives, just as the Patriots did for their homes back in 1776, even before the U.S. Constitution was written, and when there was not yet a United States of America. The states formed the federal government. That federal government cannot betray us to a foreign enemy now or ever. Whether or not our like-minded conservative governors will join us in this life or death stand to preserve our freedoms and liberties, don't know, but I'm going to call upon them to do so. Oklahoma will never submit to tyranny, not on my watch, not ever, as long as I draw breath. As Patrick Henry said in 1775, "Give me liberty or give me death." I make that same commitment to you, my fellow Oklahomans, here and now in 2022. The Heritage Foundation reminds us that James Madison captured the essence of federalism in the Federalist No. 45. And I quote, "The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. The former will be exercised principally on external objects as war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce. The powers reserved to the several states will extend to all the objects which, in the ordinary course of affairs, concern the lives, liberties, and properties of the people, and the internal order, improvement, and prosperity of the state." Now, although Congress does have broad power to regulate and even to subject states to generally applicable federal laws, that power ends when it reaches too far into the retained dominion of state autonomy. The Liberty Counsel warns us with this: the Biden administration is setting the stage to hand ultimate control of America's healthcare system and the U.S. national sovereignty over to the World Health Organization. Today, I will herewith use excerpts and paraphrase how Joe Biden is not acquiescing to foreign domination of our country, but he's actually proposing it. Now, we will see that this is not only unconstitutional, but that the 10th Amendment requires the Oklahoma governor to refuse to comply with both federal and foreign intervention in our domestic affairs. They are attempting to usurp what James Madison, the principal author of the United States Constitution, clearly defined as our rights reserved to the states, not the federal government. May 22nd to the 28th, 2022, the 75th World Health Assembly will convene at the UN headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland, with delegates from 194 nations to vote on the Biden administration's amendments that will hand over our national sovereignty and authority to the WHO, which during the COVID pandemic carried the water bucket for the Chinese Communist Party regarding the Wuhan lab. Now, back in January 2022, the Biden administration stealthily submitted amendments without consulting or even informing the American people. This treasonous act will enable the WHO to intervene in our affairs without our consent and even contrary to our wishes under the guise of a health emergency of their own making. Now, I know you recall all the vaccine mandates and lockdowns from the last 2 years. You've also heard what China is doing in Shanghai with people screaming out their windows for mercy as they're being confined and denied basic necessities of life. Joe Biden wants to bring that to Oklahoma. He will not succeed because we will stand in his way. We will defend Oklahoma no matter what it takes. The U.S. amendments delete a critical existing restrictions in the regulations. And I quote, "Who shall consult with and attempt to obtain verification from the state party in whose territory the event is allegedly occurring." Now, the Secretary General of WHO thus becomes a dictator. WHO will think he can overrule the President of the United States and even the Governor of Oklahoma, as well as the other 49 states. Folks, it will not happen here. Please listen carefully to what I'm about to say. Under current WHO regulations, nations have 18 months to reconsider and withdraw their yes vote to these amendments. But they're going to have that changed and reduced to 6 months. Do you know what happens just 6 months from now? The midterm elections. Now make no mistake, when the GOP takes control of both chambers of Congress, they will no longer be able to repudiate this unilateral agreement by the Biden administration, which was made without their consent while the Democrats were selling out our country. Remember that Republicans elected in November do not take the oath of office until January 2023. By then, it will be too late. COVID is just an excuse and only the beginning. Once Americans' sovereignty is relinquished and surrendered to foreign control, it will involve every aspect of our daily life unless you refuse to comply. That's exactly what I will do as Oklahoma governor. I will stand for all Oklahomans against every attempt to intervene in our lives. Who do you think now represents the United States on the WHO Executive Committee? Does the name Anthony Fauci ring any bells? That traitor would then have not just the federal government, but the World Health Organization trying to enforce his evil edicts upon us. Let's look at what the Liberty Foundation has revealed. The proposed amendments would give the WHO global jurisdiction over the United States, including the authority to declare national emergencies. We've already seen the lawless abuse of power under Joe Biden by the Centers for Disease Control. And finally, we are warned by the New American. This is the New World Order, in which the WHO international health regulations will be imposed upon every state in America without even the consent of the United States Senate. But as these issues were defined by James Madison as being outside the purview of federal government and within the jurisdiction of the individual states, Oklahoma absolutely will refuse to comply. I admonish everyone not to underestimate my resolve. I didn't say we should not comply. I said we will not comply. We will defend our sovereignty by every means necessary. Please realize that this is going to happen this week. May 22nd is next Sunday. I am herewith serving notice upon the World Health Organization, President Joe Biden, the United States Congress, the National Governors Association, the Republican Governors Association, and everyone else on the planet. Oklahoma will not submit to unconstitutional foreign tyranny. We will defend the United States Constitution and apply our 10th Amendment rights. So help me God. There are 13 amendments being proposed to the World Health Organization's international health regulations. Among them are those submitted by Joe Biden, which basically throw up the white flag and say, here's America, we surrender. Well, corrupt, compromised, feeble-minded Joe Biden may try to surrender, but Oklahoma will not go along with this treason. Under the new language, all that would be necessary for the WHO boss to claim there's a public health emergency of international concern, even a claim suspicion of such an emergency, would be enough to get the gears turning. In short, a full-on assault on a nation by a range of would-be global government agencies is in the cards for defiance of the WHO. I echo the defiant words of the ancient Spartans, Molon labe. Just try to come and take away our freedoms and liberties if you can. What are you going to run into when you get to Oklahomans is those that will apply not only the 10th Amendment, but our Second Amendment as well. WHO Chief Tedros, installed by the regime in Beijing, is a former member of the Tigray People's Liberation Front, an ethno-Marxist terror group designated a terrorist organization by governments around the world. Countless critics have called for him to be prosecuted for ghastly crimes perpetrated by the terror group he helped lead, and later the brutal Ethiopian regime he served at a high level. Dr. Tedros, listen. You will never dictate to the governor of Oklahoma or to the people of Oklahoma what we may or may not do. I hope you understand that. I hope Joe Biden has enough brain cells left to realize the consequences of his treason. I hope his handlers will not pick this fight with the people of Oklahoma that they cannot win. We will defend our homes with every ounce of our being. Dr. Peter Breggin, a Harvard-trained psychiatrist, has clearly warned, if passed, the Biden administration's proposed amendments will, by their very existence and their intention, drastically compromise the independence and the sovereignty of these United States. Dr. Breggin suggested this was a major step in the direction of global governance, led by a global predator class. The proposed changes would put enormous new powers in the hands of unelected technocrats, powers that would be exercised whether the target nation agreed or not. Now, I am here to tell you that if the United States Congress does not prevent this from coming to America, as Oklahoma governor, I will prevent it from coming to Oklahoma. Now, under the WHO's approach, it would be difficult to find any important national issue that was not a potential health problem, warned Dr. Breggin, pointing out that the communist Chinese regime and Bill Gates were the largest influencers at the WHO. With the imminent passage of the American-sponsored amendments to the international health regulations, the WHO will have free rein for using these expansive definitions of health to call a crisis over anything it wishes in any nation it desires. So nations would then be forfeiting their sovereign powers to the global predators who rule the UN and the WHO, including the Chinese Communist Party and supporters of the Great Reset, like Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, and the giant foundations and corporations, all of whom benefit from weakening or destroying the sovereignty of the Western nations. The American resistance begins in Oklahoma. As Oklahoma governor, I will ensure that we will not suffer this lethal blow to our sovereignty. Fear-mongering and attempted intimidation will not faze us in the slightest. As we now witness dystopian developments moving from rhetoric to reality, Oklahoma will stand in the gap. International health regulations are the Trojan horse that they think they can most easily slip through the gates into the once fortress America. Now, we know a few things about horses in Oklahoma, and we know how to keep them in the corral. We will corral any who dare to try to bring foreign domination to Oklahoma. We're also closely monitoring the proposed international pandemic treaty, which will be discussed in June, whose proponents will attempt to turn the WHO into a global health ministry with vast powers over every person and government on earth. I guarantee you that will not include the state of Oklahoma on my watch. Tedros, if you think you can apply sanctions upon Oklahoma, I dare you to try. Oklahomans are not weak-kneed, submissive pawns you may find elsewhere. Just as I have previously served notice on the Chinese Communist Party that they will no longer be able to operate in Oklahoma by exploiting the medical, marijuana farms, drug trafficking, and sex trafficking, I likewise ask who do you think you are? Oklahoma is our home, and you're not welcome here. We have open arms for everyone who respect our way of life. But we will take up arms against anyone who tries to impose your foreign will upon us. You can take my word for it, for what I am telling you is not disinformation. These are the cold, hard facts. According to experts on who processes, if a majority of member governments consent to the amendments, then they will be considered to be a part of the international law. As Oklahoma governor, I will abide by the United States Constitution, our Oklahoma Constitution, and nothing imposed from abroad. International health regulations are not binding upon all humanity. You and everyone else are going to learn that the hard way is if you try to impose them upon Oklahoma. There are several constitutional issues at hand as far as the United States is concerned. For one, the states that created the U.S. government never delegated these sorts of powers over health to the government they established. If the U.S. government lacks a specific authority or power, it certainly cannot hand a power it does not rightfully possess over to another body, at least not without a constitutional amendment. In fact, the U.S. Supreme Court confirmed as recently as 1957 in the case Reed versus Covert that the United States government could not grant new powers to itself or delegate those powers to other bodies, merely by adopting international agreements. Thomas Jefferson, a key architect of America's constitutional system, understood that as well. I say the same as to the opinion of those who consider the grant of the treaty-making powers as boundless, he explained in 1803. If it is, then we have no Constitution. Oklahoma state legislatures must nullify any unconstitutional intrusion into our state affairs. As governor, I will stand with you against all enemies, foreign and domestic. No state or local officials can participate in the enforcement of any actions originating from the WHO or under the authority of its illegitimate agreements. Now, I expect other states with conservative governors, including Texas and Florida, to also defend their sovereignty and refuse to comply with Biden's senile betrayal of America. But if they don't, as Oklahoma governor, I will ensure that Oklahoma remains free, come hell or high water. Tyranny will stop at the Oklahoma state line.